of electro, shared, and micromobility, including infrastructure and energy supply. The sector have been changing very rapidly in the recent years and exposing a lot of opportunities, but also challenges and some areas of conflict on the road to a people-centric and net zero mobility. In our talk, we will learn about the areas of growing demand and related numbers, the real needs from economic and social dimensions, and what level of net zero seems to be achievable, considering the many perspectives. In the keynote, we will get some information on how a government can balance certain aspects in the changing mobility by regulations and incentives. But let's start with an overview of the agenda. So first, Benedikt will give a Eotech address and mission statement. Afterwards, Stephanie Wolfe, in a keynote, she will present the growing electromobility market. She'll address the delivery of electric mobility on the road to net zero. Following this, we will open our panel discussion as usual, in which Olga Anaprienka, Chanchal Yeta, and Rainer Bachmann will participate. Using the given insights from the keynote, we will expand the discussion and address the impact of shared and micromobility, emerging shared mobility modes, and also energy aspects. Finally, we will have an open Q&A session with all of you. So you are invited to send in all your questions, comments, and remarks via the chat function on the top left of your screen. And as usual, also today's panel will be facilitated by Seda Yüksel, who is the director of the Mobility Alliance at Eotech Chamber. So after this short introduction, now I would like to hand over to Benedikt. Thank you, Benedikt. The stage is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Ben, for your welcome speech as always, and thanks for the invitation. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome from my side as well to all of you to the digital event of the Mobility Alliance today. I'm Benedikt Kritzel. I'm Vice President of the European Senate of Economy and Technology and also member of the advisory board of the European Technology Chamber, the Eotech, that is hosting this event today. And as Bernd said before, please let me introduce our Eotech and EU Senate environment in a nutshell to have a little warm up to the session. As you can see, I prepared a few slides for you. So if you cannot see the slides, please click on the presentation button at the bottom right corner besides this little hand button. So our Eotech Chamber was founded in 2015 with this one vision: technology obliges. And now, 7 years later, we are one of Europe's leading tech organizations in this regard with over 2,000 advocates. That's how our Eotech members are called. We are a registered NGO and a non-profit organization, and we have three major goals. The first one is competitiveness, to strengthen European technologies and to promote European values. The second one is sustainability. That means reaching the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations around the globe through European technology. And on the right-hand side, you see growth, access opportunities in Europe and emerging markets. The most important thing on the slide is you see that we believe to reach each goal with technology. So for us, technology is the key, and the key is not a prohibition or a ban or a restriction. Therefore, we are working for or with three strategic partners. You see on the top of the slide, the Eotech Chamber stands for Technology and Innovation. Then on the left-hand side, you see EU Senate. It is shortened for European Senate. It's not about EU. Yeah, it's the European Senate of Economy and Technology. It stands for Economy and Policy, and is a highly regarded network with personalities from economy, from politics, from sciences. And the main goal is to provide support, in solving the most important questions of our future, but absolutely for the most part in the interest of the common good. So it was founded by the Senate of Economy in Austria, which is an honorable council, I think, that advises the government for over 15 years, and by Eotech. So the members of the EU Senate are not only senators, but also fully integrated Eotech ambassadors and members of Eotech. So in addition to that, they are strategic partners of our Eotech alliances, like the Mobility Alliances today, because they are often more concerned with strategic issues than with the daily business. In most cases, senators are owners and CEOs of larger companies. They have a different perspective, and that has a positive impact to the whole Eotech environment. And regarding the positive impact On the right-hand side, we also work together in the so-called Mustard Seed initiative of the Vatican. And this goal is making available what we are bringing together in Europe already to developing countries and to those, let's say, fellow human beings who almost have nothing. So with this part, our whole environment, you see the three strategic partners, our whole environment is also working for the greater good. So, and the cooperation between the three organizations, Eotech, European Senate, and Vatican, this is such a strong link, because if you connect them together, you see those bubbles. With strengthen Europe, technology obligation, and politics and common good, we are going to reach mutual values in the middle. And because of that, our environment regarding these topics is very, very unique in the whole world. And just a reminder, of course, not only European citizens can become senators, but everyone. We are a worldwide network, even if we are called European Senate, European Technology Chambers. Maybe this is important information for you. The question is always, how do we work? How do we achieve these goals? And as you can see here, we have a value proposition. It's always free, transparent, and independent. And just to have a few examples, we have our Eotech Toolbox, where we offer our members and senators services for free. For example, on the left-hand side, you see below knowledge, publications, the white papers, the position papers, and the V4E is our Visions for Europe magazine in English and German language. And all our sections organize, or alliances organize, one public digital event per month, like this Mobility Alliance. It's a webinar, and if you sum up those webinars, those public webinars, there are over 200 events per year. And in addition, you see on the right-hand side below networking, you see that we have over 650 section meetings, working group meetings, where our directors, members discuss about their different topics. And then we have our virtual tech center we are in right now, our tech forum. This is the matching platform with which we can reach nearly the whole world, because there's some huge technology behind it, believe me. But for our members, the center, the tech forum, the center is for free. Even our virtual booths where we can present their companies. Of course, we have trade fairs, exhibitions regarding different topics, and then we have several big Eotech summits and delegation trips. Especially the European Senate offers those executive clubs, for example, in Istanbul, in Dubai, in Zurich, in Germany, in Vienna, in Berlin, and some other cities. So you see, it's an international network, and you see, we have some financial subsidies for selected members. They can locate, for example, for our social media program, we have a digital transformation program, investment forum, SDG awards we had the last in December. Climate action partnership is very, very important for us. So you see there are a lot in this value proposition. So ladies and gentlemen, I think we have 9/11, 9/12 now. That was my part, a short deep dive into our Eotech and EOSenate ecosystem. Now I will go out, but I will return, as Bernd said, at the end of the event to present a little gift for you, dear panelists. So thank you very much for listening so far. Have a great, great panel, and always keep in mind, technology obliges. Now I want to hand the microphone to the director of the Mobility Alliance and our today's moderator, dear Serda. The floor is yours. Thanks for listening. See you again.
Thank you, Benedict. As Benedict and Bernd before have mentioned, the Chamber wants to achieve specific targets. The European Technology Chamber is a network of people knowing from many perspectives what technology is and how to deal with technology. If we take this seriously, we have to bring together the relevant stakeholders. So let me introduce to you all Stephanie Wolfe, our keynote speaker today. Stephanie Wolfe holds a PhD in energy economics. She's Program Manager, Electromobility at NOW GmbH, NOW, the National Organization for Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technologies. NOW, NOW is the implementer of federal funding programs in the field of sustainable mobility and energy supply on behalf of the German Federal Ministry of Digital Affairs and Transport. She's responsible for the science-oriented perspective of market activation of battery electric mobility, in particular, the electrification of fleets in commercial and municipal applications. As an e-mobility expert, Expertise lies in the charging station, I mean at the crossroads of the sustainable energy and the sustainable transport transition. Stefanie, it is our great pleasure to have you here today. It is now the time to share your ideas with us. The stage is yours, please.
I pushed the wrong button. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen.
Sure,
Good morning. Good morning from Berlin. Yeah, thank you for the warm welcome, for the nice introduction. So I brought some slides for you. So I work for a national think tank fully funded by the German government, and my topic for today is driving the energy transition, because what we do is we coordinate funding programs for bringing up the vehicle market, the alternative fuel vehicle market in Germany. So that's why my title is Driving the Energy Transition. I brought 4 main topics for you today. So first of all, I will talk about what NOV or NOW in English is. I will point out the status quo of e-mobility in Germany. I will give a brief overview of environmental policy instruments in Germany, but also on the European level. And then I give you some really interesting facts and figures about the development of battery size within the German electric vehicle fleet. Okay, so NOV. NOV coordinates support programs, so subsidy programs, advises within the spectrum of technology, and is a big networker. So what you can see here are the different funding programs that we coordinate on behalf of several German ministries. And we are fully owned by the government. And for example, on the left-hand side, on the top left-hand side, you can see the National Innovation Program, which was the founding program of this organization or think tank we are, because it funds all the national hydrogen and fuel cell activities. Me, myself, I work for the Electromobility On-Site program, which is about battery electric mobility in passenger cars and light-duty vehicles. And then we have several other funding programs. The third one is the National Center for Charging Infrastructure that we founded 2 years ago to coordinate the nationwide rollout of charging infrastructures for battery electric vehicle, which also includes high power charging infrastructures. And then we have many, many more programs to have a full rollout of electric mobility, alternative fuel mobility. And so for each mode, for each transport mode, so lorries, big commercial vehicles, planes, trains, and buses, also public transport, we have each their own funding programs. And what for you is very interesting is the Export Initiative for Environmental Technologies, in short, the EXI. And you share the same goals. It's about promoting sustainable energy infrastructures in also development countries. Because today's topic is mobility, I'm not going to talk about this export initiative that much, but if you're interested in it, I can send you further information and connect you to the colleagues who work for this program. So this is our whole portfolio, and let's continue to our mobility topic today. This is the funding program I'm responsible for at the moment, and I just want to give you a short glimpse into what we do. For example, what we fund in Germany is, for example, we fund the purchase of cars and charging infrastructure for municipalities and small and medium enterprises. So this funding program is not targeted at private car owners. For private and also for all buyers of electric vehicles, we have the so-called innovation premium. So you get a subsidy anyway, but municipalities and SMEs get more funding for this. And then we have R&D funding for universities and research institutions to foster research and development in Germany, together with also partners from the industry. And then on the right-hand side, you can see concept and consulting, because what often happens in municipalities, they have different kinds of vehicle fleet. So the gardening, the postal offices, and all these services you have in a municipality have their own car fleets. And sometimes they don't know how many cars they have, they don't know how far they go. So there's not really fleet management going on, especially in small municipalities. So we give them some funding to first get a status quo of their fleet, and then see how this fleet can be electrified and where they're supposed to put charging infrastructure. And so we have this not only for battery electric mobility, but also for all kinds of mobility, also for buses. If a public bus company wants to electrify their fleets, we also have this concepts and consulting funding programs for them. I like this picture very much because it shows the charging landscape. Really, it says on the top, funding landscape for charging infrastructure in everyday life. And I like it because it's a road. So on the top, we have charging infrastructure at your own home with the number 1. And then it goes to number 7. Where we also fund charging infrastructure such as street space. So for every possible use case, there's funding available. And you can also see the numbers. I mean, there are millions and millions of euros available for funding here. And I just want to give you a quick overview and then get to the topic. This is the funding program for the commercial vehicles with alternative drives. So here also just some conditions, also a timeline. I come back to the timeline in the panel discussion as well, how long we will need subsidies in Europe and in Germany. Okay, we not only offer funding programs, but also supporting tools. So we try to match the demand and the supply of charging infrastructure areas, so where people would like to charge their cars, and also the supply. So we offer a tool, a platform where people can sign in, where they would like to offer their land, their municipal land, to install charging infrastructure there. And people can also access the platform to say, we need charging infrastructure exactly at this point. So there's a matching going on then. And we also offer e-learning for municipalities to give them some advice how to deal with charging infrastructure, because it's a very technical topic and not everybody is that technology open. Okay, just to give you a short overview of what's going on in Germany. So in Germany, we have around 42 or 45 million passenger cars, and of which 1.3 million are electrified at the moment. And this is the rolling stock from 2019 to 2022. meaning these are the new registrations of passenger cars. So on the right, you see the monthly registrations of all the cars. And in blue, it's the battery electric, hybrid, and fuel cell electric vehicles. And you see in February 2022, we had around 2,000 new registrations of cars, and of which 1/4, 50,000, have been electrified. And the same holds for charging infrastructure. We are rolling out the so-called Deutschlandnetz, the Germany network. It's a German-wide network of charging infrastructures, and there's a tender going on right now, a tender for a nationwide demand-oriented and user-friendly fast charging network with around 1,000 locations. So it was a public tender, and charge point operators could put in their offer for this tender, and so we also tried to match the supply and demand there. And the tender on the right hand side, you can see, is also organized on a regional level, not on the nationwide level, but also on the regional level, which makes the coordination then easier. I'm an energy economist, so I would like to give you a short glimpse in why am I doing this. So here you can see the emissions, the CO2 emissions over the last 30 years, starting in 1990. And these are the emissions in the German transport sector. And we see they haven't changed at all. Only the pandemic changed it. In 2021, we see a slight dip, a slight decrease in the emissions. But in 8 years, by 2030, we have to halve them to 85 million tons. So this is my goal. This is why I'm doing this. And these are the goals of the German federal government in the transport sector. And yeah, historically, we just have seen it's hard to reduce the CO2 emissions in the transport sector. And on the right-hand side, you see that we believe we can reach these goals with all the options needed. So renewable fuels, electric mobility, and hydrogen mobility. That's what I'm working here. And on the next slide, I show you a picture that we energy economists use to explain the policy instruments, the environmental policy instrument for reducing the transport sector emissions. So in red, we have the command and control instruments, which are, for example, emission performance standards that hold in Europe technical standards and input and output restrictions. So in Europe, on the left bottom, we have the CO2 fleet emission threshold and low emission zones. We have the Clean Vehicles Directive. We have the Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Regulation, R4, and we have charging infrastructure regulations. For input and output restrictions, we have tradable permits, for example, the European Emission Trading Standard, the EU ETS, and also we have this in Germany on a national level. And then instruments of more persuasion I find very interesting. These are labels, energy efficiency labels. You have seen them everywhere in Europe, at refrigerators, but also at cars, and nudges. So I think energy efficiency labels nudge you in the right direction. We have seen quite many nudges during the pandemic. Keep right, spread over the whole train platform to disperse. So these are all tiny nudges, which I find as an energy economist very, very interesting, very fascinating. And then on the right-hand side, we have economic instruments, of course, subsidies. We have the purchase subsidies, the fee-based, the fleet exchange programs, and reduction of our renewable energy reallocation charges in Germany. And then, of course, we have charges and taxes, the Eotech, of course, and we have now an orientation of the car taxes on the CO2 emissions of the car you buy. And of course, lastly, the tradable permits again. So these are the frameworks we are working with on the European level, but also on the national level. And my company, NOW, is there to make a picture. I'm sorry, this is in German. We have it in English, I hope. At least I asked them to have this in English, because these are all the laws and regulations that hold for electric mobility in Germany. So on the top left, we have the laws and regulations that hold on the European level. And then on the right, we have the federal level. And then on the bottom, we have the communal level, the municipal level, and the federal level. And if you can't read this because it's so small, you can't read the next slide because these are all the laws and regulations that hold. So this is just to show you what's going on and what kind of laws and regulations are there. And there are still many more missing because we are still missing some standards and common rules. Okay, so the next 1 minute I have here, I would like to share with you some nice illustrations of the battery sizes we have at the moment in Germany on the road. And we see that the 4 big companies, Volkswagen, Renault, Tesla, and Hyundai, they share half of the battery size market on the German road, which is quite interesting, for example, for vehicle-to-grid businesses. And this is just a nice picture that our data scientists did. I find it very interesting because we also see which models have the biggest battery and yeah, what we can do with these assets on the road. And this means also driving the energy transition. And this is a slide where we can see the development of battery sizes within the fleet according to the sectors, economic sectors these cars have been registered in. Again, it's in German, but we see service sector, energy sector, car sector. These are the private cars. So we see that the actually, the energy sector, which is the green one, has been the most electrified in Germany. So they have the most electrified cars in their fleet in Germany compared to the other economic sectors. Okay, so this brings me to the end. Don't miss out if you sign up for our newsletter. It's also in English. We have a very good homepage in English. Also to get informed about our export initiatives and how we can help you also in getting connected with the right actors and players. Please get in contact with me or my colleagues. It's all on the homepage. And we also have online seminars for the municipalities who are eligible for the funding. And if you click on the network slide here, you can see all the international networks you could also be a part of. This brings me to the end, and I'm looking forward to your questions in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, for your keynote, sharing these comprehensive insights. I'm sure many of us have had some idea on her introduction to driving the energy transition. These are main aspects of our mobility needs and desire for the delivery of electric mobility. Although there started a discussion in the chat, I guess it is now a perfect time to integrate Olga Anaprienka, Chantal Jetta, and Rainer Bachmann in our discussion. But before we start with our panel talk, I'd like to introduce them to all of you. Olga Anaprienka is a principal consultant at Steer New Mobility Team, working for both public and private sector clients across the areas such as zero-emission vehicles, shared mobility, and emerging services such as MaaS, mobility as a service, and CAVS, connected and automated vehicles. Olga is also a co-founder of the Women in Mobility UK, a not-for-profit organization working to bring more women in the transport industry, hopefully. And Chanchal Jetta is an industry analyst working with Frost and Sullivan. She's a researcher and strategist tracking the shared mobility ecosystem, including various segments like car sharing, ride-hailing, DRT, micromobility, MaaS, etc. He tracks the trends and investments, business models, innovations, and opportunities. Churchill loves reading about innovations, technology, and business side of products, services in the shared mobility space. And she's passionate about bringing sustainability principles in mobility in turn, making cities more breathable, and less congested through her research. I hear an echo. Maybe you would like to make your mute. And Rainer Bachmann mastered in physics at the University RWTH Aachen. He became responsible for software-based process automation in Krupp steel plants and later at Tyson. He came to several major international companies and headed IT and innovation of Dominex. At the time, the largest German E&P company and operating on the worldwide level. His next position was partner in the internal management and strategy consultancy of the RWE Group and then led business development for e-mobility. Then he returned as an executive board member to management and strategy consultancy. Since 2017, he was heading the platforms and operations CIO role in the e-mobility business of E.ON, giant energy company, plus working the federal government. Since February 2021, he returned as the CEO to an international management and strategy consultancy focusing on sustainability, energy management, digitization of the energy transition, smart cities and grids, and e-mobility. Dear audience, at this point, I would like to give a general note again and invite you all to share with us your questions about the keynote or around our theme today, growing demands in mobility. You can send the questions at the Q&A section of this meeting room, top left when you click public chat. Later, I'll pick up some questions to discuss among our panelists, and they will be also commenting and answering your questions, keeping an eye on the public chat. Please do not wait until the end of the panel to send your questions. You can do it anytime. Starting from now let's start our panel with you, Olga, Chanchal, Rainer, and come to the first talking point. In the keynote, we learned the need for driving the energy transition on the growing electromobility market. These are main aspects of our mobility needs and desire for the delivery of electric mobility, but perhaps we can continue with a bit of an overview of other aspects of shared micromobility, emerging shared mobility modes, and energy aspects. Olga, Chanchal, and Rainer, the first questions I would like to address to you first. After that, we would also like to hear the views by Stefan too. All are representatives of global companies and consultancy businesses. Being the executives, from your experience, how can we see the demands in mobility and how has demand for shared micromobility changed over the last 2 years? What was the impact of the pandemic, Olga? And then the question to Chanchal will be, how has the mobility patterns changed post the pandemic with various changes, like suburbanization, hybrid working, etc. And then Rainer may like to answer, how can renewable energy systems be used to replace heating based on fossil energy sources? And then, of course, I will ask to Stephanie, what brings the numerous stakeholders in motion? What does NOW offer? But maybe we can start with you, Olga. How has demand for shared micromobility changed, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here. Probably shared micromobility, I talk about shared bikes, e-bikes, e-scooters, and other like light and low-speed vehicles. In general, the shared micromobility market has been growing, with a significant part of its growth being accelerated by the rise of shared e-scooters. And I think McKinsey estimated that in 2017 there was 1 million trips done by shared e-scooters, which grew to 160 million trips in 2019, which actually shows how much of the growth is driven by this new transport mode. When we talk about demand for shared micromobility from public, over the last 2 years, of course, it has been disrupted by the pandemic. And I say it's different locations due to certain local circumstances, but broadly speaking, I will talk about European markets. And I think, well, obviously, when the pandemic just started, there was a short-term drop, which was driven by the initial lockdowns and the operators closing their operations due to the response to the pandemic. Although, as it happens on the short term, the medium term, the operations resumed quite quickly, I'd say, and the public has responded with a growing demand. I think at STIA, we analysed the data from TfL Cycle Hire, which is a bike share scheme in London. And basically, we found that the number of trips was higher in May 2020 compared to May 2018. And an interesting one was that the trip duration doubled from 20 minutes to 42 minutes, which basically during the pandemic showed that people were replacing their public transport trips with the bike share, which is kind of understandable because the government was advising against using public transport. Also, in terms of the behavior change of the bike share users, there's a good survey run by Coma UK annually. So the data from the annual survey from 2021 in the UK shows that when the bike share users were asked whether they had changed the amount of the cycles since they started using the scheme, the bike share scheme, over half reported an increase, with like 39% stating that they are cycling more often, and another 21% choosing the options indicating that they're cycling much more often, which shows that as soon as people bike shares, they start using it more often and more often and more often, which actually brings the demand for the service higher. And probably just to kind of conclude, I think that the demand, well, my conclusion is the demand is growing on average across Europe, and it's probably driven by the factors such as, well, as I mentioned first, the governments were advising not to use public transport when the pandemic just started. People were generally afraid to get on public transport due to the safety issues and being in a crowded bus or tube originally. It's no longer the case, but that's how the behavior started to change and the demand started to grow for shared micromobility. In general, also in the market, there is more supply now. There are more micromobility companies offering different types of vehicles, which include shared e-bikes and shared e-scooters. I think another trend which is driven the demand is electrification. Obviously, e-scooters are electric, but what we see now is the rise of e-bikes. And basically, what the operator is saying is that the utilization rate of e-bikes is much higher than the utilization rate of standard pedal bikes. I think Bicen, the bike share scheme in Barcelona, they saw a 50% increase in utilization of e-bikes over traditional bikes when e-bikes were introduced to the scheme. And also the data collected by Beryl, another bike share scheme in the UK, in 2021 also shown that e-bikes, in comparison with standard bikes, are used for longer journeys and for longer time. I think the average distance for standard bikes was around 2 kilometers, while e-bikes experience a length of 3 kilometers. It also shows the potential for different type of trips and different type of users of e-bikes. And I say also another factor which contributes to the increasing demand in the use of shared micromobility is potentially the rise of mobility as a service and integrated, which allows for integration between public transport and shared micromobility modes through one platform or an app. And I think I've seen the stat from the shared micromobility operator TIA, which they mentioned, and areas such as Berlin, Munich, or Zurich, where they integrated their service into MAS platform. They seen that the share of the trips which are coming through those platforms on average accounting for 2% of all trips, which is a big additional 2% of trips to their demand. So kind of to conclude my long speech, I think that as I mentioned previously, I think the demand is growing. Of course, there will be some locations where it drops, but the trend is up, going up.
Thank you, Olga. And now maybe Chanchal, would you like to talk and give your view, including suburbanization, hybrid working, etc.? Please, Chanchal.
Sure. Thanks, Adar. So, yeah, we've been tracking the shared mobility market from the past 10 years in Frost & Sullivan. And like since the past 2 years, because of the pandemic, we have seen the market fluctuating a lot. So the COVID-19 pandemic has definitely changed the way we travel. There's been a significant shift in the mobility patterns. So when the pandemic was at its peak, what we saw was like, say, utilization rates fell down drastically for public transportation and DRT. Like it fell by almost 70 to 80%. And they were some of the worst hit segments. And even other segments like ride hailing, car sharing, even over there, the utilization fell drastically by about 50%. But recently, things have been changing. And a very good indication of the change is the mobility data from the Google's community data. So what we've observed is that the workplace trips, they're still below the pre-pandemic level in some of the major countries in Europe, like France, United Kingdom, etc. However, things have changed a bit for Germany, where the workplace trips are like 4% more than the pre-pandemic level. And apart from that, when we even look at the public transit, the trips to the public transit stops, what we've observed is like it is still below the pre-pandemic level. It's almost down by 20% when we compare it to the pre-pandemic level. And when we look at trips to national parks, public beaches, etc., over there, the trips have increased drastically post the pandemic. So it has increased by almost 20%. So looking at all these changes, at how the workplace trips have changed, the public transit, people have started using public transit a little bit lesser. All this has obviously, it has brought about a shift in the demand and the type of mobility used. Apart from that, we have seen one more trend, which was like at the peak in 2021. What we observed was during the pandemic, a lot of people moved away from the city centers to the suburbs. And this trend has not been so strong in 2022 as it was in 2021, because in 2022, like the hybrid work has started and so on, whereas in 2021, it was majorly remote working. In fact, in 2021, the number of homes which were bought by Londoners outside the capital, it increased by almost 60% when compared to 2020. So what we have observed is as people move to suburbs, businesses like restaurants, shops, etc., even they start reallocating their staff. And then because of that, people are becoming very closely linked with the residential areas. So mobility operators, they need to focus more on local journeys. So we've seen three major things because of suburbanization. One is there has been more active modes like walking, cycling, and micromobility sharing, which Olga just spoke about. So like this is basically used for the 20-minute journey where, like lesser than 2 to 5 kilometers and so on. And then the second is the development of the shared hubs to improve the accessibility. And lastly is the hub and spoke model, where the suburbs are really well connected with the cities because of the hybrid work model. When people have even shifted to the suburbs, they can come back to the city for 2 to 3 times a week. And this would essentially give rise to the 15-minute cities. So like, I would just like to conclude saying that eventually there will be a rise to a 15-minute cities, which will reduce the commute times And there will be a use of more sustainable modes of transport eventually. And this is what we'll be seeing.
Anything you would like to comment on, Shanshul? Or we can continue with Rainer. How can renewable energy systems be used?
Yeah.
Yes, please, Shanshul. Sorry.
Yeah, we can continue with Rainer.
Okay, thank you, Shanshul. And yes, please, Rainer, about renewable energy systems.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you know, in Europe, we will have to rely on renewable energies in the future, definitely. And problem with this is that they are volatile, of course, like wind and solar thermy and solar PV photovoltaics are all volatile. So we need storage, and here it's where the electromobility comes in, because the electromobiles, the EVs, offer a lot of storage capacity in the cars. And Stephanie already mentioned it. It's not only one way; it's also the potential to inject the power from the batteries back into the grid, into the electricity grid. No? That is one possibility. And we will have two major areas where to work on it. And when we are talking about heating, let's talk about smart city quarters, which will be provided with heating in the first step using heat pumps, which are being operated using electricity from renewable energies, let's say based on the commercial buildings. We gave a recommendation to the government to especially look into renewable energies and photovoltaic on top of commercial buildings, because that is where the electricity and the energy will be consumed in a way, and also there's a much more space on commercial buildings and on private houses. No? So we are talking about that, and so we will have the heating based on heat pumps. This will probably not be sufficient in the first step. So the other thing is to use natural gas and interim technology for the heating in the buildings, in the commercial buildings especially. And in the near future, we will use hydrogen. And hydrogen will be generated by PV or more likely with wind farms close to the coast, also onshore, offshore, but close to the coast, because for the generation of hydrogen, we need water. And we can't take sweet water from the country, which is getting low anyway already. So we have to go to the shores where there is much more wind anyway. And so it's a better place to set up wind farms. And we will set up wind farms all along the coast in Europe. That is our idea. I'm working on this with Bahman Ahmedabad, one of my colleagues from the Energy Council. And so we expect that we will set up wind farms along the coasts and then take salt water, desalinate it, and take it as sweet water, and then we generate hydrogen. And for the transport and distribution of hydrogen, we will use the already existing pipelines for gas, for natural gas. They have to be upgraded a little bit, at least on the higher pressure areas, levels. And so, but this is already under work and has been planned. And we will provide this hydrogen in the future also to provide heating to the commercial buildings especially, but also to private buildings now, because there will be one distribution system. And the other things that would have to be mentioned, we also have heat maps where we can go for geothermy. So it means not heat pumps are going not that deep, but if you go very deep, you know the solid part of the Earth is only 30 kilometers thick. And below that, we have a fluid kernel of the Earth, and it is really hot there. You win 30 degrees every kilometer you drill down, and there are already experiments here going on in Germany where they're doing a really deep drilling with geothermy and providing heating for this sort of district heating to quite big cities like Aachen in the area here. No? So the future will be to use renewable energy, generate hydrogen, or use renewable energy for heat pumps, and use geothermy in the future, which is also, in a way, it's not renewable, no? Because you take it from the Earth's thermal reservoir, so to say. Pardon. But the thermal reservoir of the Earth has been operating since 4 billion years now, and we expect it will take some more billion years before it's going to cool down. So for the heating part, we will have a solution based on hydrogen, photovoltaic, and especially on wind farms. Now, this will definitely be the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Rainer. And before passing to our other question, may I just ask shortly, Olga, I was surprised when you compared the distances between e-bikes and bikes. It's just 3 kilometers and 2 kilometers examples you have given. It's surprising for me. I was thinking, or what I was expecting, e-bike, the distance would be much more than you have given, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think it depends on the scheme. So the stats which I've given was from the scheme in Norwich in the UK, which is quite a small city. So you don't have a vast distances, like, for example, in Paris and London. Norwich is smaller. So I think that vote is driven by...
Okay.
Generally, it would be slightly higher, I'd say.
Thank you. Now it is clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
And yes, please. Please, Olga.
This will be slightly lower compared to private use of e-bikes.
Thank you. And Stephanie, what does NOW offer about stakeholder in motion?
Yeah, so we try to bring all the relevant stakeholders together. So we talk with the users, with the municipalities, with the companies who give electric vehicles to their employees. We try to talk to the infrastructure providers, to the car manufacturers, and to the traffic organizations, and we try to bring them all in one room. And this is one fact I actually learned during my PhD. And Rainer and I, we know each other from back in the days at E.ON and my research work there. And so, yeah, it was so frustrating to get for example, the car manufacturers and charging infrastructure providers not in one room so they could talk with each other. So that was also my motivation to work where I'm now, to get everything in motion, to talk to each other, to find common grounds of discussions, how we can change the transport system in Germany. So that's what we are here for. And now we offer many online seminars. 2 weeks ago, we had our own big electric mobility conference where the Minister of Traffic and Transport gave the welcoming speech. And so we really have to cooperate also. For example, shared infrastructure, shared charging infrastructure. Maybe we have two companies next to each other, and the one needs to charge during night and the one needs to charge during the day, so they can share one charging infrastructure park or parking lot. So that's what we try to do with our work.
Thank you. And Olga, Chantal, Rainer, and Stephanie, for sharing your perspectives to the current situation of the discussed form of growing demands in mobility. For the next topic, I would appreciate the ideas from each of you. Again, the framework conditions and strategy must be designed to ensure technical and organizational tasks to implement growing demands in mobility. And Chantal, what sort of an impact has this shift in mobility demand had across various segments in shared mobility, and what are the key growth areas in the short to mid-term? And then maybe Rainer can comment what benefits can renewable energy systems offer for transport, logistics, and mobility. And then Stephanie can comment, please. I appreciate to elaborate in the export initiative that you have given in your presentation shortly for environmental technologies, which is, I see, a very interesting funding program for all the audience here, besides the mobility topic too. And then, Olga, what are the key challenges in shared micromobility now? But now maybe we can start with you, Chantal. What sort of an impact has the shift?
Sure. Thanks, Ada. So while all of us thought, the shared mobility market, it will be completely battered because of the pandemic, and that did happen to a certain extent. 2020 was an extremely difficult year. But what is amazing to see is how quickly all the operators realign their business models and they've come out stronger. So, when we look at it now, during the pandemic, there was an increase in usage of micromobility and so on, and other modes like public transportation were badly used. So, currently, as travel restrictions are easing, what's happening is people are turning to their old habits. They're quickly using their private vehicles and so on. So it's become really imperative for cities to act fast so that they can retain some of the mobility related behavioral changes that were seen during the pandemic. That was, use of micromobility and so on. And while all the segments post, which were heavily affected during the pandemic, while all of these segments, they have rebounded post the pandemic, I would say there are two particular segments where we have seen explosive growth in the last 2 years. One being the DRT segment, and the other being the micromobility segment. So now, people are still wary about using transport options like PT for commuting, and that is where the DRT comes in. They provide technology-enabled safe transportations, and that's why they've seen an uptake in the past 1 year, especially in 2021, and we've seen the increase even in 2022 in the first 3 months. So as companies have reopened, there has been a lot of innovation on the corporate mobility front. Because people want flexible working with the hybrid working model. Employees are expecting flexible working options, and that's where the B2B DRT services are seeing an uptake. Some of the companies, which are providing these services, and they're providing some amazing technology like Zelo, BusUp, Liftango. These are some of the few companies which are doing excellent in this space. Now, similarly, coming to the rural DRT space as well. The rural DRT is actually slowly picking up. There has been, the number of pilots in the B2G segment, they've been growing exponentially. These pilot projects are funded by public research programs, and that's why the rural DRT segment is also picking up. One of the most noteworthy players is VIA. And apart from that, there are other players as well, like IoT, Swivel, etc. So IoT is like a technology player, and Swivel is one of the leading players which got recently listed in NASDAQ. We have also seen an acquisition spree in the DRT segment, the demand responsive transit segment. So Swivel, a leading player, has acquired Shortle and Door-to-Door. And what we're seeing is DRT is currently in a consolidation phase, where the bigger operators are acquiring the smaller ones, and it is definitely set to grow. The other segment, which is being micromobility, I won't dive too much deeper into the micromobility segment because Olga has already mentioned how we saw massive growth and how the number of trips have increased, and even the duration for which vehicle is used, how that has increased. So that is already being touched upon. So I won't dive much deeper into that. But we've seen one more thing is the number of investments which have been pouring into the micromobility segment. They've been booming. So in the past 2 years, if we see, there has been an investment of close to 3 billion, and it has been raised by 25 micromobility sharing operators, which is a very, very big amount. So there's definitely increased interest in both the demand responsive transit segment and the micromobility segment. And, we expect them to continue growing in the short to mid term. Like COVID has brought to light the huge potential which is offered by these segments, as they've been a resilient mode of transportation. The shared mobility market is dynamic and young. It has a lot of potential for future growth, investments, and innovations. So we at Frost & Sullivan, we estimate the overall revenue from the shared mobility market, and we expect that to exceed by 1.9 trillion by 2030. So that speaks a lot about the potential for growth the shared mobility has to offer and the key areas of growth. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chanchal. And what about the renewables for transport, logistics, and mobility, Rainer?
Yeah, and the German Nationale Plattform Mobilität, so National Platform Mobility, is funding something like 1 billion euro to set up charging parks across the highways and in interesting areas. So charging parks will be the future, and the charging parks will require a lot of power at each moment. You never know. And for this, you will use an artificial intelligence to make a forecast on when cars are going to arrive, especially trucks and buses. Let's talk more about trucks now. They need a lot of energy, and they have to be charged very fast. Good information is that trucks have to make a rest every 4.5 hours and for 45 minutes. And this might be a good idea to charge them during this period. But then you have to know when they are going to arrive, the state of charge of the battery and all that. And this can all be done by digitalization. No? So when we are talking about energy transition at this moment, we are always talking about digitalization. Without this digitalization, it will not work. No? But with it will work. No? So we are connecting with the e-truck information system and asking where's the car, where's the truck, and what is the state of charge, what was the average consumption in late, what's the next place he is going to go for. For this, we will have to connect to, we are connecting to a logistics platform. Where's he going the next step? How far has he to go? And so from this we derive and how much the battery has to be charged and all that. So this is, like I said, all the digitalization part. And this also takes place, of course, in the city quarters that I mentioned before. No? We not only have an energy management system, the best of all worlds, we have to use a virtual power plant, because then also with the charging parks, we expect that we will have quite large batteries in each charging park to avoid peak shaving, but also to allow to charge the batteries, which will then forward the energy to the trucks to charge the batteries at times where prices are low. Something like renewable energies, which are being locally generated. We have a problem in Germany. We can't transfer the energy from the north to the south, and we have to shut down wind farms in the north because the energy or the power is too much for the transmission system or for the transport system. And then we shut it down and we start conventional power plants in the south, which is on the macroeconomic side not really reasonable. But we are only talking about since 15 years. Now this is a problem. But however, the wind farms are getting their fees, and in 2020 they had to pay something like 770 million euro for shut down wind farms. No? So this could be used much better for charging parks and consume it locally and transfer the renewable energies locally to the charging parks and to cars in any way. Let's say during the night, wind is blowing all the time, but the load on the grid is low. So this would be a good idea or a good point of time to charge the batteries of the cars, which will be connected anyway during the nights, at least 95% of them. And that's what we are talking about on the logistics side, on the e-truck side, and also on the car side, to use renewable energies. And also with the big batteries, you can play in the market, not only in the energy market, but also in the flexibility market. You can do fast frequency response, because in Germany, especially, central power plants are fading out. We have only a few left, I guess less than 10 we have left. And so we need decentralized energy devices to stabilize the grid, the transmission system, but also the distribution system. And this could be done, of course, on the best, in the best case, on the best world, especially by batteries, and which would be then on the other side used in the charging parks for charging cars, but also to offer flexibility to the market, to the spot market, to the energy market, and even to stabilize these grids, like injecting reactive power or reducing grid harmonics and all that. So more power electronics you have in the grid, the more problems you have with harmonics in the grid, which can shut down the grids at every it is one of the most dangerous things that can happen to have harmonics in the grid. No? Harmonics means wrong frequencies, not the 50 hertz, but something else like 30, 20, 10, whatever. No? And this can be reduced. We have done a research project on this, on the European Union, right, in 2020, research project on it, and it was very successful. We could show that with charging and injecting at the same time with another group of cars would reduce this harmonic distortion of the grid very much. No? So this is also a potential in this, using the charging parks not only to charge parks, but also to play in the electricity market, in the power market. And this will then, you will get some fees for this from the transport system operator, the distribution system operators, and this will reduce your costs for charging. No? This is the other thing. So the electricity, and also I would like to mention that fuel cells, we don't see it for passenger cars, no? Because the efficiency is not very high, but it could be useful for long-term haul. But on the other hand, we feel that batteries might will be able to do the same job. And so, so batteries, e-trucks, and the digitalization, the integration with the overall electricity system is definitely a thing that will happen and will be very profitable, interesting, and supportive in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Rainer. And yes, Stephanie, can you please elaborate more your expert initiative, please?
Yeah, sure. It's a very interesting program for the attendees here. So the main idea is that Germany is an exporting nation, export country, and we have a very strong group of small and medium enterprises that promote these new innovative technologies with regard to energy infrastructures. So that's the idea behind it. We try to bring those abroad to development countries and create a global access to environmental technologies using these international opportunities for the German small and medium enterprises. We contribute to local value creation by distributing this distributed and off-grid power supply, for example, with hydrogen and fuel cell technologies. And we try to establish an appropriate framework of conditions and infrastructures. And we have two kinds of projects. We have showcases and feasibility studies. And I posted the link in the chat on the English-speaking homepage on this initiative. So you can have a look. There are fact sheets, and there are also contact informations. And on the fact sheets, you can see, for example, that we have showcases and feasibility studies all over the world, in India and Africa and South America, in Asia, where we try to support communities by installing off-grid energy infrastructures. So it has basically nothing to do with mobility, but it's a starting point to help those countries get more sustainable than we are in Europe right now. Yeah, so if you have any further questions on that, I'm not an expert in that, but my colleagues, so contact my colleagues on the homepage or me, and I will pass you on then to my colleagues. But yeah, I think it's a great opportunity, and maybe Sarah, we can coordinate an extra talk from EXI. We will be happy to give another talk or another short presentation on the topic here.
Very good idea, Stephanie. We can do it in that way. We can invite our audience here to our networking event via email. I'll do that, and we can invite your colleague to present that initiative, and the audience can understand more how they can make use of it. That would be a great idea. Thank you, Stephanie. I will do that. And I will also study in details. It seems it's very useful for those countries. And about the key challenges in shared micromobility, Olga.
Yeah, sure. So I think probably one of the challenges is the lack of standard regulations and unified regulatory framework for shared micromobility and micromobility in general. I think if we talk about shared e-scooters, the regulation is different in each European country, and sometimes where you find that e-scooters may not be legalized, like in the UK. They're currently in the trial phase when the government is assessing whether they're safe or how they should be run and whether the national regulation should be changed. And I think also the regulation on e-bikes sometimes can be confusing because it will differ depending on the speed and the motor size of the e-bike, which probably not the key issue for shared micromobility, but for the private use, it could be quite confusing for the end user to understand what type of e-bike you can ride on what type of path. So sometimes it would be they wouldn't be allowed on the road because if you talk about speed pedelecs in the UK, for example. So I think to sum up, the regulation varies and there is no unified approach to it. And especially with shared e-scooters, I think it should change because the regulation can define, the national regulation can define the vehicle size and, well, the user age, but also it can define where the vehicle is allowed to be ridden, whether it's a cycle path, whether it's a road, and whether it's banned to be ridden on the pavement. The other challenge is the general probably lack of appropriate infrastructure for shared micromobility. And when I talk about infrastructure, I'm thinking about the cycling, segregated cycling lanes. And this is the issue which the authorities need to look at and in general increase the amount of segregated and shared cycling infrastructure in the cities, not just in the city centers, but also in the suburbs, improving the city and city connectivity. Also, in terms of infrastructure, we can talk about the parking spaces and infrastructure for shared for parking of shared micromobility, and probably one of the areas which the cities can work together with the shared micromobility operators is how do you regulate the parking and how you arrange it in the way that it doesn't create the clutter on the streets, because it's another challenge that sometimes shared micromobility vehicles, if left unsupervised on the streets, cause the clutter and it caused some troubles for pedestrians. In terms of also of the parking of micromobility, shared micromobility, the issue is that if it is regulated and you have them designated spaces for it, you need to have high density of them in order for the end user to to experience it in the best possible way. According to the surveys, I think the user is willing to walk between 2 to 5 minutes for shared micromobility vehicle. So the density of the shared micromobility parking should be high. I think what's happening in Paris at the moment is quite a good example. They've introduced a dense network of shared parking, parking for shared micromobility. In general, challenge for the micromobility operators is commercial feasibility. I think though many micromobility companies have achieved significant investment recently from the venture funds, some of them have struggled to achieve sustainable profitability, and normally the issues such as vandalism or misuse or general operational inefficiencies are mentioned as those which predicts achieving those profitability. Although recently some of the micromobility operators announced that they reached profitability and which allowed them to secure more investment, and also in some countries like CIS countries, so Eastern European countries or like Asian countries, they claim that they're already operating at profit. So it kind of differs depending on the geography. And probably another key challenge is about coordination with local authorities and the cities and the willingness of cities to cooperate with the shared micromobility operators, because through this cooperation what would come is to you can ensure that the shared micromobility is not cannibalizing on the public transport, but actually provides relevant first last mile links to public transport, and also is able to serve the gaps in the transport network. And well, there are many more challenges, but probably one more to mention as kind of relatively short vehicle life cycle of shared e-scooters mainly. And at the moment, I know that the operators are currently working on releasing of new models and extending the life cycle of the vehicles.
Thank you, Olga. And also Shanshul, Rainer, Stephanie, thank you. And for the final questions regarding the examples, advices, and responsibilities, I will need to get your answers in 1 to 2 minutes maximum, please, to use the remaining time efficiently. And Rainer, can an extended sector coupling support the plant energy resilience of the EU in 1 or 2 minutes, please?
Yeah, I think I already mentioned it. So the resilience will be based on renewable energies, definitely. And since they are volatile, so it will be PV and wind, definitely, and geothermal for the heating. So we are not only talking about energy transition, but also about the heating transition. And we will have to store it, and that is hydrogen in the future, which will be generated in Europe or in the neighboring countries, but only with countries where we have, let's say, a good cooperation with, or traditional good cooperation. Originally, we had been planning to do this in Ukraine, a lot of space, and an existing pipeline already in place. So we will find a way, and we feel that it will be possible, but it has to be done on the EU level. No? We have to work together on the European Union, which is a good idea anyway. No? Thank you.
Thank you, Rainer. And Stephanie, how long will we need subsidies, do you think?
Thank you to Chantal and Olga for your facts and figures from your domain, because it showed me that a lot has been done, and a lot is going on beside the vehicle sector. And I work for as long as I make myself unemployed, as long as we don't need any subsidies anymore. And that's when I have reached my goal and I have done a good job. And of course, we also point out the avoidance of traffic and the shift to more sustainable ride sharing, ride pooling mobility measures. And yeah, that's my last sentence. So we have done a good job if we don't need subsidies anymore.
So thank you, Stephanie, Olga. What are the key opportunities and trends? What should we expect in near future? As Rainer and Stephanie use their time so efficiently, maybe you can give some details.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the shared micromobility, I'll just briefly go through probably the key trends which I've seen in the market. Is a consolidation of the market, so the acquisitions by certain companies of smaller companies or different type of companies. Probably the recent one is the TIA, which is originally was a shared e-scooter and moped company, which recently introduced e-bikes. They acquired Nextbike, which is a traditional established bike share company, and then they follow up with acquiring Spin, which is another shared e-scooter company. Previously, we know that Lime acquired Jump Bike Share, and Bird, the shared e-scooter company, acquired Scoot and Sick. And there are many more acquisitions happening at the moment. And I think, as Chantal also mentioned, it's happening everywhere in shared mobility market, not just in micromobility. Probably another trend is electrification, and in this essence, I'm talking about more e-bikes being introduced everywhere in the scheme, everywhere in the schemes around the world. Another one is the diversification of the fleet. So different operators, they're starting to offer them multiple vehicles. So they're not just a e-scooter company, e-scooter share. They're offering bikes to their fleets, and sometimes they're adding electric mopeds. And also the trend is a potentially new vehicle type. So in micromobility can arise in the market. So maybe, I don't know, e-scooters with the seats or other modifications of e-bikes. Also, there is lots of research and development is happening, which is driven by the operators who wants to increase safety, inclusion, and operational efficiencies. And we're seeing a lot of technological developments happening, such as, I don't know, they develop the GPS tracking, the advanced braking systems, new parking solutions, the use of sensors, the use of artificial intelligence and big data to optimize their services. They introduce different new in-app features and training models, and invest in the software development. Another trend is probably focus on sustainable operations. So lots of micromobility operators pledge that they want to achieve sustainability goals and work towards it through different range of initiatives. Another probably area of opportunity or trend is the mobility as a service and mobility hubs. So as I mentioned previously, is the integration of shared mobility with public transport through the MaaS type of apps and platforms. And probably the key one is need for the deep integration links between the shared micromobility and the MaaS providers, but basically allowing for the end user to get information, book and pay for a multi-leg journey via MaaS app, which includes shared mobility and public transport, which probably offers another opportunity to increase the first last mile trips. And another kind of trend which has been happening in the market is the amount of funding from venture capitals being poured to the shared micromobility companies. It's huge and there is a huge interest. So I think this trend potentially can stay. There'll be more investment in future if required. And in terms of the opportunities, there is an opportunity for the operators to start expanding into tier 2 and tier 3 cities, so not just concentrate on the capitals where the market is saturated. So potentially we can see the trend of the operators starting to focus on expansion to a smaller type of cities where competition is not that high. And probably the last one as an opportunity, I think it's offering the services not just in the city centers, but increasing the offer in the suburban areas, basically serving for different type of demographics, and also helping to bridge the gap in the provision of public transport. I think from a commercial point, it probably could be quite challenging to achieve due to the demand in suburban areas potentially could be lower. But if shared micromobility companies work with cities and the local governments, I think could be achieved through the partnership.
Thank you, Olga. Now we got all the hints. For those who are entrepreneur in the audience may like to use them all. Thank you. So helpful. And maybe in the remaining 1 or 2 minutes maximum, Chanchal, why does electrification fit in on the list of agenda for shared mobility operators, please?
Yeah. So electrification has sort of been a buzzword in shared mobility for quite some time, and it is also one way through which operators can improve their efficiency. So when we look at the shared mobility segments, like say the transit and the ride-hailing segment, they cover majority of the mileage. And recently we have seen this trend where the transit segments they're building the EV fleets, and even they're building charging infrastructure. And when we look at ride hailing as well, the public taxis, they are also building the EV fleets and so on. And hydrogen taxis is also a renewed area of interest in this space. Apart from that, what we have seen, one very interesting example I would like to give, that is of Bolt. So in Bolt in Europe, they started this experiment where they have both micromobility sharing and taxi on their app. So they started an experiment where when you book a taxi on their app, they would just, for the short distance, so they would just nudge the user and say that, you can probably use a kick scooter or something like that. And, it will be easier also, and that it will have lesser emission also. So electrification is definitely important. Apart from that, operators are even taking a different route in order to reduce their emissions. We've seen like a lot of companies in Europe, like Zelo, Bolt, Tier Mobility, they're already carbon neutral. So they're carbon neutral by offsetting their emissions. And even ride-hailing companies are, following a similar route. So definitely electrification will continue to be an important part for the shared mobility operators to become more sustainable. And overall, we are definitely seeing shared mobility operators are like moving in the right direction so that they can meet the sustainability goals, and they can even meet sustainability goals set by the countries and the cities and by the EU region in itself.
Thank you. Thank you, Chanchal. And some questions have just been discussed in the panel already and in the chat. And thank you, dear audience, for your questions and your comments and answers, our panelists. And time has just flown by, and we're almost at the end of our talk. Olga, Chanchal, Rainer, and Stefan, I know you all and I could have spoken for much longer since you're passionate about this topic. And a big thank to you. So let me quickly say thanks to Bernd. A big thank to you, Stephanie, for your keynote speech. And many, many thanks to you, Olga, Chanchal, Rainer, for having shared your views in such a succinct and structured way, not only your thoughts and insights on this topic itself and beyond. So now our chairman will provide you the 3 certificates. Let's give a floor to Benedict Groots. Yes, please, Benedict.
Sarah, thank you for being here again. Let's make it short. As I mentioned in my introduction in the beginning of this webinar, I'm happy to present this gift for our panelists, the 3 certificates. You can see it here in the presentation window. As you can imagine, climate protection is not only one of the biggest goals of the United Nations, but also of us and our organization, and therefore we are very active in this topic with our climate action partnership. So I would like to thank you, dear panelists, on behalf of Eotech and also of the Presidium of the European Senate for your contribution. We really appreciate this great panel. And here we are. Here are the 3 certificates. Here with the European Technology Chamber confirms that a tree for Stephanie, a tree for Chanchal, and a tree for Olga has been planted in Africa by Eotech Mobility Partnership, Climate Action Partnership. And dear Rainer, as you know, you will not receive a tree certificate today because you are board member of the Mobility Alliance. I hope it will eventually be okay for you in the far future, dear Rainer.
Okay.
Again, really appreciate this great panel. I think there were a lot of good points to discuss about further. So look at all those chat messages. So now, ladies and gentlemen, have a great time. Thank you very much for being our guests today. And now it's to the point, 10:30. Back to you for the last words. Dear Sarah, thanks for listening.
Thank you, Benedict. And again, thank you, Bernd, Stephanie, Chanchal, Olga, Rainer, and Benedict. And finally, thanks to you, the audience, for your time and great questions. Please do get in touch with us for any questions and ideas that have arisen from this talk. Whether or not, there are many ways to get to know us and our work better. One is by participating on our monthly events like this one today, as well networking meetings. I will send you an invitation for the next one to connect with other experts and to evaluate the solution space for a system change in mobility. See you next time. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. You are so great. Thank you.